Okay, so you're all very welcome back after lunch. I'd like to welcome you now to our final oral session of the day from the School of Business. I'd like to remind all the presenters that you have 7 minutes to present your research and 3 minutes for questions and answers at the end from the panel and the audience. Please keep an eye on the traffic light as if you couldn't. And I now invite Joe MacDonald, Head of Department of Management and Organisation, and her presenters to the stage. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Tom O'Toole, Head of School, sends his apologies. He can't be here this afternoon, and I'm standing in for him. Firstly, on behalf of the School of Business, I'd like to thank the Research Support Unit for organising today and for their continuing support for our staff and students, and also, of course, to wish our students well. My primary job is to introduce the 3 students from the school making oral presentations, but apart from the 3 students here next to me presenting, the School of Business has 13 students presenting on a huge range of projects. 1 student on the 3-minute thesis competition, 7 students have poster presentations, and 2 were involved in the 1-minute poster pitch earlier this morning that was Nolan and Anthony. In the school at present, we have 58 postgraduate research students. 4 are completing Masters by Research, 31 are on a PhD track, and the remaining 23 are on the Professional Doctorate in Business Administration, the DBA. And 26 of the school staff are involved in supervising our research students. The broad theme of the School of Business Research is about enterprise and organisation development, looking at regional and international comparisons and focusing on small and medium-sized enterprises and micro firms. Areas of research specialism among the researchers include enterprise development, knowledge transfer, learning networks, SME finance, regional SME policy, rural enterprise, and management and business process innovation. The 3 students presenting this afternoon represent each of the 3 departments in the school and will give you a flavour of the diversity of the school's research. So it gives me great pleasure to firstly introduce Oksana Doherty. Oksana is registered in the Department of Accounting and Economics. Her research is social learning and informational cascades in financial markets. Oksana is currently in her 2nd year, heading into the 3rd year in September. She's supervised by Dr. Cormac O'Keefe and Professor William Forbes, and her research is funded by the AIB Centre for Finance and Business Research. And apart from being busy with her research, Oksana is also a WIT ambassador. So, Oksana.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I think I'll just jump straight in. And what I'm going to talk about today is my PhD research, which is a work in progress. And the general area of my research is herding, but I'm more specifically interested in informational cascades in financial markets. But before I get into the details of it, I would like to tell you about the background of my research, my objectives, the design of my study, and I will show you what I have so far. And if I have time left, I'll talk about the plans for my future research. But before I get into it, I would like to show you something that I think all of us will find very familiar. And the sound is not working. Can we get the sound working? Sorry. Okay, I'll get back to it at the end if I have time. But so why do we herd? Why do we copy each other, and is herding good? In conditions of uncertainty, humans, like other animals, herd together for protection. Herding is our natural instinct, but somehow we've become embarrassed about herding, and the world has become negative. But man is a social animal, and copying is an essential thing about human, and it all starts with infants mirroring the facial expressions of their mothers. We worship uniqueness and originality, but we are not independent thinkers at all. Most of the things that we do because we've seen others do it. And it is precisely our ability to copy the useful information about the environment that we live in and the behavior of others that allowed us to survive as species and make us successful. And it's precisely the ability to copy or mimic others that got us where we are. Good or bad is a different story. But to mention, it's also our innate ability to herd, or the need to herd if you want to, that can lead to inefficient and sometimes detrimental outcomes for a society. We've all been part of the recent housing bubble, and we all know how it felt like. The concept of herding has been studied through many, many disciplines, and examples that involve herd behavior are very numerous. This is what herding in financial markets looks like. The activity comes in waves, because markets are herds, and they move like herds. Sometimes you want to be able to read the herd, sometimes you want to be able to be with the herd. What I'm interested in is a subsection of herding, which is in observational or social learning, learning by observing others, and informational cascades that sometimes form as a result of that learning. Informational cascade is a situation where all the subsequent followers disregard their private information and make their decisions based on inferences that they made based on the actions of their predecessors. An occurrence of informational cascade in economic settings is linked to how agents make their decisions. In that sense, initial public offerings markets has many settings where information cascades are possible. So what I'm trying to do through my research is to investigate those waves in initial public offerings market, or cascades, to see how they form, why do they form, what are their characteristics, and how often do they form, and what industries are more prone to informational cascades. I also would like to look at the role of underwriters in formation of those cascades, and the role of information releases, to see how they affect informational cascades. And how I'm going about it is by applying the model of observational learning to real-life IPO settings. The model was introduced by Big Chandani, Hirschleifer, and Welch, and it applies the dynamic of imitative behavior as informational cascade. The model has two scenarios. One is observable signal and action scenario. It's a situation where followers can see both the action of their predecessors and the reason for choosing that action. And the second scenario is the observable action only scenario. In that scenario, the followers can see only the action of their predecessors, but they cannot see the reason for choosing that or different choice. What I have so far is a sample of 985 IPOs in the UK market in the period of 1985 to 2015. And I'm looking at my sample through purely quantitative research by applying statistical analysis to see the dynamic within the sample, and later on by using regression models to see the relationship between different aspects of herding. What I have so far is the dynamic of IPO activity in the UK in the years 1985 to 2015, and the three waves are obvious in that sample. The 1994 to 1999, that's the first wave, 2000 to 2003, and 2013 to 2015. They start very, very abruptly, as you can see. The number of IPOs increases very sharply, and slowly the cascades die out. If we break these cascades by months, we can see the dynamic within the cascade. The activity is quite irregular, and spring and autumn months seem to be more active. With time, cascades dislodge, probably when more and more information about the outcomes of the initial investments become visible. So when here I just compared the IPO activity in UK market and the USA market. And the internet bubble that we all heard about is an obvious wave in both markets. However, in UK, it is delayed by a couple of years. In USA, it starts in 1991, and UK, it's 1994. And also, the formation of the cascade in UK is much, much more sudden. It starts with 142 IPOs going out in the same year, where in the USA, it's a bit more gradual. So as you can see, the frenzy has different dynamics in different parts of the world. So what can it tell us? The cascades can be very sudden. They dislodge when more information becomes available. The cascades are very useful and beneficial for issuers, because when people are in a frenzy running around buying stock and shares, who benefits from it? It's underwriters and the issuers. And for that reason, pricing of IPO is aimed at convincing early investors to attract them as early as possible, and to manipulate later investors to disregard their private information and join the herd. Thus, underpricing of IPO is aimed at rewarding the early investors, or attracting an expert investor and reducing the delay before action time. Those investors who know how cascades work, they can benefit from it. They can predict the outcome of an IPO, and they can join an IPO wave early in the process and profit from reselling their shares to later joiners. So in conclusion, we all herd, and herding is normal. Herding is good, and it helps us in many ways. And we herd because we learn from each other. It is important to understand that you can be swept away with the herd, and that can be very, very dangerous. But you can also join the herd, and that could be very valuable. Markets are herds too, and because of the social and observational learning, markets often display situations where it might be more beneficial to disregard your private information and join the herd. And that's how informational cascades are formed, and markets move in a way. It is important to realize, however, that the communication between market participants is often restricted, and manipulation of financial decisions through inducing an informational cascade is possible. Because in terms of markets, and not just markets, and in terms of outcomes and profits, if you want to influence a large number of people, you have to influence how they act when they are together. It's not about how you make an individual person feel, it's about how you make people behave around each other. And that's the danger that we have to be aware of. Thank you. Sorry. I can't hear you, sorry. We can play it if sound is okay, yeah?
Sound was just muted.
Oh, okay.
Your presentation, sorry. It's just here.
That'd probably be over time. That'd be okay.
It's
no?
okay.
That's okay, because it was our fault.
Okay. I get the bonus.
So where was your slide?
Here. That's the slide. Yeah.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering.
I'll go into the full slide just so everyone can see it.
Just press in here.
I'll just do this one.
The gentleman in the elevator now
But I was going to stop it.
is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff, will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the candid camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups before.
There's more, but I won't play it because it's just to be aware of the time.
Has anyone any questions?
Thanks. I just wanted to know what do you think are the practical applications of the research?
What I'm trying to find out is how the policies that surround the financial markets can be influenced. If it's easy to manipulate financial decisions and many other decisions in people's life, then there should be not situations, but safeguards that prevent this manipulation for personal gain or profits. Or in the other way, if people that know how to use that, they will use that. So somebody has to be watching over it. Therefore, there are policies at the moment now, but I don't think they prevent the manipulation much. So I think there's a need for different kind of policies, and that's the idea behind the research.
Hi, thanks very much indeed for the presentation. I was just wondering, is one of the ideas to model this type of behaviour and then to predict it, can you, if you are...
I think that's exactly what's happening in the markets now. Issuers and underwriters, I think they predict, and that's why they bundle the IPOs, and that's why they come in waves. And the internet bubble was an obvious one. It's just easy to quote internet bubble.
Okay.
And
so have you looked at those models and look at how sensitive they are to those changes?
The model observation learning is actually the model that studies this.
Yeah.
It hasn't been applied to an IPO market in full, and that's what I'm trying to do, but it's the model that looks at the behaviors.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'm just wondering why it is that herding is a big factor in the numbers of IPOs. Could it not be other factors, other economic conditions, or other ways to fund companies? I mean, could those not have an impact, or how do you isolate the herding factor?
You mean that the wave could be different reasons for the wave?
Due to other factors.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's an interesting question. That's exactly what I'm trying to find out, because I know there are waves. The fact that they start so suddenly is actually a sign of not IPO, but a cascade, because cascades usually start suddenly. People who, investors or actors in the market, they delay their action until they see someone who is an expert or someone who has the highest cash flow would be an IPO, go in for an offering and they join the cascade. So the fact that they start so abruptly is a sign for me that they are actually cascades. But I will be looking into more details on it because I understand the question, and it is important to differentiate the reasons for clustering.
Just one follow-up question. And, are you planning to look at the share price post-IPO in terms of its volatility and how that impacts?
I am, of course. And underpricing is one of the things is that underpricing is used as an incentive to get investors to join in early. So I would be looking at how the price moves and how it relates to the wave itself, because I think that those IPOs that have that are first in the line, they will be underpriced more than the later ones.
Okay. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce you to Louise Doyle. Louise is registered on the Doctor of Business Administration in the Department of Graduate Business and is heading into her 4th and final year in September. Her research, how the multi-levels of individual learning and team learning interact in public healthcare organisation, is supervised by Dr. Felicity Kelleher and Professor Dennis Harrington. Louise is business manager at the National Doctors Training and Planning with the Health Service Executive, and her research is funded by the Health Service Executive.
Hello, good afternoon everyone. Well, my name is Louise and I'm coming towards the end of my 3rd year in the DBA programme, and I'm working with Felicity and Dennis in the School of Graduate Business. So my research aim is to understand how the multi-levels of individual learning and team learning interact in public healthcare organisations. And my research objectives are: how does the interaction of individual and team learning occur, and what are the processes and conditions that facilitate or hinder the movement of learning between the two levels. So multi-level learning explores learning at the individual level, the group or the team level, and at the organisational level. And those 3 levels are linked by the social and psychological processes of intuiting, interpreting, integrating, and institutionalising. So if an individual intuits something and they discuss it or interpret it with others, it can lead to shared understanding developing and joint action being taken, which is the learning being integrated. And if that proves to be successful and it becomes part of how things are done in the organisation, it becomes part of the routines, the learning becomes institutionalised. So there has been some multi-level research to date, but there's still a lot more that we can learn about the mechanisms that facilitate the flow of learning between the levels. So in order to explore the multi-level interaction of individual and team learning, through engaging with the literature, I've developed this proposed conceptual framework. And it seeks to illustrate learning flowing both successfully and unsuccessfully between the individual and the team. And it sees the individual as the starting point for collective learning, and it recognises interpreting as a social process that's at the intersection of individual and team learning. And really it's delving more deeply into that interpreting process that's important to help us to increase our understanding of what makes the flow of learning happen between the individual and the team. In the study, organisational learning is viewed from a social constructionist perspective. So that means that learners are seen as social beings who create their own understanding through social interaction, conversation and discussion. And the research method is an interpretive case study, so that allows for the subjective and contextual experience of the participants to be captured in the study. And so far I've obtained ethical approval from the ethics committee here, and I've developed a data collection plan, and I'm also recording how data collection happens in practice. Semi-structured interviews are my primary technique for data collection, and my participants will be interviewed once and up to 3 times over the course of the study. And the interviews are being supported by a documentary review of relevant organisational documents and also by a review of my reflective log. And I'm maintaining my case study database as well of the documentation that is forming part of my study. The data analysis is by means of inductive thematic analysis. So I have 11 participants in my study. They're all non-consultant hospital doctors, or NCHDs, whom I've recruited from the training bodies and the intern networks, which you can see on the left there. So I have 3 participants from anaesthesia, 1 from radiology, 2 from psychiatry, 1 from emergency medicine, 3 from surgery, and 1 intern. and they've all participated in the first round of semi-structured interviews, and I'm doing the second round at the moment. So, what are my initial findings telling me? Well, the initial findings indicate that the role and the preservation of seniority is really crucial in how NCHDs learn. So seeking out more experienced colleagues who've greater levels of clinical experience is a key strategy in terms of seeking answers and solving problems in the workplace. Intuitive capacity or gut instinct is a catalyst for learning. And so it can be an indication for somebody that they need help in a situation that they're in, or it might let somebody sense that there's a problem or that something's wrong with the patient, even though test results mightn't be suggesting that. Obviously, you've got to recognise those intuitions when they occur to you for them to be useful to you. NCHDs, as you might know, rotate every 6 months quite frequently during their training from hospital to hospital. And so the initial findings suggest that that may make some individuals less likely to engage in sharing ideas or coming up with improvements as part of the team that they're in. Despite the inclination towards maybe being told what to do rather than maybe being more proactive, certainly the initial findings did exhibit instances where teams figured out something new together. Informal learning plays a strong role for NCHDs in terms of how they develop understanding, and it does complement the more formal mechanisms that are available to them. And the informal learning helps them to become more embedded in their team environment. And finally, interpersonal relationships, they have a strong influence in learning at the level of the team. And the social processes that are involved there include having respect for experience and for seniority. So the potential contributions of the study include then to develop understanding as to how to enhance the effectiveness of learning interactions in medical and other healthcare teams, with the intention then of using that to improve the learning experience for NCHDs and for others. To enhance understanding as to how the process of individual learning within teams could become more effective, and that's a key component of organisational learning. And from the multi-level perspective, to address gaps in our understanding of how the multi-levels of learning interact, and to shed light on the mechanisms that facilitate the flow of learning. And finally then to contribute to longitudinal and qualitative research in the field of organisational learning. So thank you very much.
Any questions in the audience?
Very, very interesting. I think hopefully we'll all be able to learn from that. I'm not sure if this is working, but oh, there we go. I just have a question. If you're, and I may have gotten this wrong, but if your aim is to examine learning from a social constructivist point of view, but your methods are essentially interviewing individuals, how are you not missing out on that sort of group, the sort of social constructivist, because ultimately you're not able to capture the sort of environment or the context in which they're learning?
Well, I can capture the context from the perspective of the individual. So being an interpretive case study, like I do feel it is aligned and is suitable to a social constructionist way of looking at things. And it is very much taking account of how the individual perceives that they are, you know, learning, and how are they interacting with the team, and how it's things that they know moving to the team, and how do they perceive that they are gaining maybe some learning and increasing their understanding from what the team knows. So looking at it from their perspective. Yeah. Okay.
Any other question? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
The final presenter from the School of Business is Sharon O'Brien. Sharon is registered in the Department of Management and Organisation. Her research: why and when are customer-oriented service employees attracted to service organisations? Sharon is supervised by Dr. Susan Whelan, and she has just completed her transfer viva and will be heading into the third year of her research next academic year. And Sharon's research is funded by the WIT PhD Scholarship Programme.
So, over 85% of jobs in the US are in service industries, and this is a trend that is replicated in developed economies worldwide. From an Irish perspective, the service sector is the main force driving our economy and accounted for over 62% of economic activity in 2015. So service organisations play a very important role in economic development, in innovation and in job creation. My research then focuses on a fundamental means to influencing long-term and sustainable success in the service sector, and this is through the recruitment of customer-oriented workers. So the aim of my project is to identify the conditions under which customer-oriented individuals are attracted to service firms. Guided by our qualitative findings, which I'll be going into, we consider customer orientation to be a psychological construct. So it's something that's inherent in people. And the customer-oriented workers are not homogenous. Different skill levels, roles, industry norms, and other different factors may affect customer-oriented employees and their job decisions, as opposed to other workers who are not necessarily customer-oriented. So there are numerous definitions of customer orientation. Brown and colleagues' definition is one of the most widely cited ones. They consider customer orientation to be an employee's tendency to meet customer needs in the course of conducting their job. So they propose that customer orientation then is a psychological phenomenon, and that it is a surface trait which results from a combination of the person, so the individual's personality and their goals, and the environment, so their work context and the role that they're doing in their job. A surface personality trait then is an enduring disposition to behave in a certain way in a certain context. So it's context specific, unlike basic personality traits which guide us in many situations. So a worker who is customer oriented in work may not behave in that way in other situations. So the research is important for a number of reasons. Firstly, bodies such as the OECD and the ERSI demonstrate how the sector plays an increasingly important role in economic activity and employment globally. Secondly, services are generally intangible, so the actual service and the employee are often indistinguishable to customers. So in other words, the employee becomes the personification of the organisation in a service context, and this is in the absence of a physical product. Thirdly, a study by Grizzle and colleagues in 2009 demonstrated that customer-oriented behaviours of frontline employees in combination with a customer-oriented climate or market orientation of the firm have a proven positive impact on organisations' financial performance. So there's a proven financial link between customer orientation and firms' actual performance. So this very complicated looking slide then is an overview of what we know and what we don't know about customer orientation. So what we know is everything to the right of the red line. So if we work from the top down, we know, for example, that factors like engagement, job stress, and production orientation, that's the intention to complete your job task as efficiently as possible. These all mediate customer orientation's effect on performance outcomes, supervisor ratings, self-ratings, and customer ratings. Then we know that a combination of customer-oriented climate and customer-oriented behaviours of service staff have a positive impact on performance outcomes, on actual financial performance outcomes. Then we also know that the effect of customer orientation on job responses such as job satisfaction, organisational commitment, organisational citizenship behaviours are contingent on aspects of the work environment, including, for example, the amount of time that employees spend with customers. And then to the left of the red line, this is what we don't know about customer orientation. So there's a lot of work in attraction literature on attracting job seekers in general, but there is a research gap around what attracts customer-oriented workers. So, excuse me, the methodology then is a two-phased approach. And uses exploratory and experimental methods. Phase 1 is the exploratory phase, and this ran from April to May 2015, and I had an additional interview in January of this year. The objective was to develop an understanding of customer-oriented attractors. So I spoke to customer service champions in a number of organisations. And then this information will feed into phase 2, which has yet to be fully scoped, and this will empirically test conditions that best predict how to attract customer-oriented workers. So this then is an overview of my primary research activity. I conducted 16 interviews in 9 firms, ranging from SMEs to corporates. It included a mix of 9 different service industries. So I spoke to people in telecommunications, in banking, recruitment, hospitality, and a number of others. And the findings highlight significant differences between high and lower skilled customer-oriented workers. So the workers I spoke to were identified as customer-oriented, but there were differences between what attracted them to the organisation depending on their skill level. Higher skilled customer-oriented workers have longer continuous relationships with customers, and these are characterised by partnership and trust. And these people tended to be attracted to the organisation by organisational prestige, and the brand of the organisation was very important to them. Lower skilled customer-oriented workers tended to have higher numbers of customer interactions daily. For some, these were face-to-face, it could be over the phone or email, and these tended to be of shorter duration, and the relationship between the employee and the customers was much more deferential, so was definitely a case of the employee serving the customer. And these people tended to be attracted by functional aspects like location. The findings also highlight the importance of job autonomy and job complexity for customer-oriented workers and how these can impact their job decisions. This then is the theory base. So the person is the job seeker and the level of customer orientation. The work situation then, these are factors that we found important in exploratory research: role skill and role autonomy. And using factorial analysis, we'll establish if there's an interaction then between these factors. The experimental phase then, this is what we're working on at the moment. We will have a number of experiments. We will have high skill, high autonomy, high skill, low autonomy, not autonomy, low skill, low autonomy, etc., and 4 manipulations. And these will be pre-tested to rule out competing explanations. Currently working on the factors and the measures. The dependent variables will include organizational attractiveness, organizational intention. The independent variable is customer orientation, and the boundary conditions, role autonomy, role skill, and control variables, contact time, demographics, and we will analyse them using SPSS and OVA. Thank you very much. And thank my supervisor, Susan Whelan, as well, please. Thank you.
Anyone, any question they would like to ask Sharon?
Thanks very much, Sharon. That's excellent. Can I just clarify, in phase 2, what approach are you taking in relation to the participants?
The sample is going to be very important, obviously. So the ideal scenario would be to interview people who are active job seekers, so people who are actually looking for a job. And one of the companies that I interviewed for in the initial stage in the exploratory research is a recruitment firm. So we've got a position there that that we could hopefully engage with and get a sample down that route.
Anyone else? Up at the back there. Should form up and then.
Well, thank you very much for a fascinating presentation. I'm just wondering, have you thought about an international dimension to it? The reason I ask is, and this is only at the newspaper level, but you may recall at some point during the recession there was a fascinating initiative in Paris, and the initiative was, quite seriously, the records are still there, of little letters sent around to all the cafes and restaurants. And the suggestion was that the waiters could be a bit more friendly. It was as simple as that. But as far as I remember, and I'm afraid this is purely newspaper output, so who knows what the real result was. But according to the newspapers, the answer was actually no. They couldn't change their habits. They simply, as you mentioned, it came down to things like personality and ingrained habits that they simply couldn't change. And I just thought it was interesting because although we Irish might complain about customer orientation, you very rarely hear at the international level people complaining about customer service in Ireland, whereas in other countries that's not true, and it would be an interesting comparison, I just thought.
Well, customer orientation, to be customer oriented, it's not just about being friendly and dealing with customers that way. You actually also have to have the ability. So I know that the waiters in France, they're trained, they go to college to learn how to become waiters, but they're not necessarily got the other aspect of it. So it's kind of like a jigsaw of the different elements that make up a customer oriented person. It's great to be great at what you do, but to be friendly and engaging with people, but you also need to be great at what you do as well. And actually some of the firms I spoke to were international and didn't really see any difference necessarily between them, but they tended to be corporate, so it was less. I interviewed one waitress, and she was somebody who was brilliant at what she did and loved her job as well, and definitely that's the whole package.
one final question up the back there, please.
Sharon, in your design of experiments, your dependent variables all seem to be categorical. How do you plan to score them?
We're scoping that. That's something we're looking at the moment. I've developed two aspects that came out as being really important were skill, the skill level, the role skill, and job autonomy. So it's something that we need to look at. Autonomy is really important in customer orientation as well, because again, you can be great at what you do and you can be a really nice person and engage with people really well, but you also need to have that decision-making power, whether it's on a small level or on a larger level. So they came out as being really important, and it's kind of a work in progress, so I'm sorry I can't fully answer it at the moment.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sharon.
Thanks very much.
I'd just like to thank our three presenters and to wish them every success with their research. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joan. So I suppose that brings our oral competition to an end, and I see our evaluation panel for the next session. If you want to sit in the third row there, yeah, exactly where you're going, Jennifer, thanks a million. It's just easier to see when you're not so low down or high up. I'd like to congratulate all of our oral presenters here today. I think they've all been fantastic, and I think they really deserve a big round of applause. If I could invite our oral panel, please, if you wouldn't mind going over to AO1 and deliberate and choose your winners. So I want a first and second place for you in around 20 minutes, if you wouldn't mind. And I'd actually like to introduce our panel for this evening's session. We have Professor Willie Donnelly, who opened our research day here this morning, the president of the Institute. We also have Jennifer Schneider. Jennifer is a Fulbright scholar working here in WIT at the moment on our research. And we also have Alan Smeaton, Professor Alan Smeaton, who is on the Irish Research Council. He is one of their board members, a long-serving board member there, and works in DCU and kind of founder of Insight Research Centre there. So we're privileged to have you all on the panel here today. Obviously, Alan is involved today because of the hashtag Love Irish Research campaign that the Irish Research Council have. So again, I know we have you tweeting with the hashtag with Research Day. So if any of you are promoting your own research or putting links to publications on Twitter, please use the hashtag Love Irish Research as well with your publication, and it really will increase the number of hits your publication will get. I'd like to invite now Sheila O'Donoghue. Dr. Sheila O'Donoghue is in the School of Business here in WIT, and she's going to MC the 3-minute thesis competition. So just very briefly, hopefully the slides are timed away here, so Sheila, you won't have any duties here on moving on the slides. We're going to try and control them ourselves. So for those of you who have the 3 slides, it will literally move on after a minute on each slide until it comes to the end. And for those of you who only gave me 1 or 2 slides, I have them timed appropriately, hopefully, for you. So thanks a million, Sheila.
Thanks, Susie, and to all of the staff at the RSU, very efficient and great organisation in this wonderful day. It's my pleasure to introduce the 3-minute thesis, which is an academic competition that assists current graduate students with fostering effective presentation and communication skills. Participants have just 3 minutes and 3 slides to explain the breadth and significance of their research project to a non-specialist audience. Presenters, please note that your slides are timed, so they will move on automatically, and then there will be 2 minutes Q&A after each presentation. So our first speaker is in the School of Business, and the title of his work, Dave Paisley, the title of his work is An Investigation of Additionality and Inefficiencies in Enterprise Supports, a study of Irish enterprise support system. So David, when you're ready.
Does that move on? So every year the Irish government spends a few hundred million on supporting small and medium enterprises, and they do this through agencies such as Enterprise Ireland and what were the City and County Enterprise Boards, now the LEOs. And every year they love to publicise it. It's last year in the 2015, they kind of celebrated 21,000 jobs. The purpose of this study, this research, is an evaluation of this. It's to find out how many of these jobs were created by this investment by the state, in other words, additionality, and how many of these would have been created without support. That's deadweight is the theory behind that. So according to the OECD, these concepts are notoriously difficult to measure, and through this work I can confirm that. Deadweight, it has been evaluated in Ireland and overseas, and when I say evaluated, it's been measured, it's been quantified, but there's been very little done to find out, well, what's behind that, what causes it. So this study, it has brought in a range of other inefficiencies that have been found throughout the literature in different jurisdictions and different areas. They've all been measured separately, so for the first time it's brought together this this new framework to measure deadweight in relation to what's going on in other parts and other shall we say, elements of support. It does so to get a better understanding of deadweight, and it does it with compares both supported and unsupported enterprises, something which hasn't been done in previous evaluations. It also gathers the views of the agencies. Previous evaluations kind of look at the policy and then they jump straight to the enterprise to ask, well, what are you up to? Rather than actually looking at those who administer it, who decide who's getting what and so on. And as I say, it's a mixed method. It involves both surveys of the enterprises and interviews with them, as well as interviews with the agency representatives as well. And it also looks at additionality in a much broader sense, looking at it at the different levels. So the findings from this study, basically it's found lower levels of deadweight than were previously found in other studies and other jurisdictions and other times. Basically 12% of those projects that were supported would have gone ahead without any intervention at all. So in other words, it's full deadweight. 18% would have been abandoned, so in other words, it's full additionality. And the rest would have been what was called partial deadweight, so they would have gone ahead but maybe on a smaller scale or a longer time frame. When these kind of deadweight projects are applied to the jobs that they create, you find that nearly approximately 40% of jobs that are created would have happened anyway. In other words, these jobs are deadweight. There was not due to state intervention. The reasons for deadweight is primarily due to finance availability, or substitution. So deadweight would have happened because the enterprise would have had access to other finance anyway. Therefore, they didn't need the state support. The thing is, in previous literature, partial deadweight has been found to be a bad thing, but in this, it's actually found, by talking to the agencies, found to be an achievement of agency goals. So the main implications of this research is basically on cost per job, that it increases the cost per job, which is a key kind of metric for measuring success of government policy. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Just you were saying 40% would have gone ahead anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So did you have any? Was there any net value in getting the support for those companies?
Yeah, it's for some of them, for say the 12% of companies that were say full deadweight, they didn't really feel that they got that they could have gone ahead anyway. But that said, it would have affected other areas of the firm. I didn't quite get to it in this, but when they say would have been able to get finance from elsewhere, it would have been redirected from other company activities, so it might have affected their cash flow or investment in another area of the business. Then there are those other examples of companies that would have gone ahead without support, but at the same time it's just simply a case of they would have had the cash flow to do it and it wouldn't have had any influence. So it's
quick question, quick answer. Were you surprised by your results?
Yes, simply based on the fact that the results were much lower than previous studies found, but then kind of delving into it, the reasons why, to actually find that it's not actually as big an issue as thought, but it still has an implication on costs.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So the next speaker is the first speaker in the School of Science, and that's Colin Dillon. And the title of Colin's work is Development of Novel Drug Delivery Technologies for the Transdermal Delivery of Therapeutic Peptides.
Thank you. Therapeutic peptides are biologically active pharmaceutical ingredients which are currently used to treat a wide range of conditions ranging from cancers to diabetes, obesity, and skin conditions. They're highly selective drugs. They are relatively safe and well tolerated by patients. They're a huge area of growth in the pharmaceutical industry today, with sales in 2018 expected to exceed $28 billion. However, the problem of delivering these drugs is far from resolved, in that mostly they are limited to parenteral delivery, which is via injection. My project is to evaluate a dissolving microneedle system to deliver therapeutic peptides, microneedles being micron-sized projections which are applied to the skin similar to a patch. My needles are composed of biodegradable polymers and sugars which actually retain the drug material in the needles and release them into the skin on application. I've to date carried out extensive characterization studies on the needles, including scanning electron microscopy to look at the actual structure of the needles, the ability of the needles to penetrate porcine skin, and also how deep they penetrate the skin, the fracture force of the needles to ensure that they're strong enough to penetrate the skin, and also disintegration profiles, needle tip sharpness, and the water absorption profile of the needles. Very importantly as well, I've carried out studies to look at the activity of a model drug within the needles at all stages of the formulation process. This is very important biological drugs to ensure that no loss of activity occurs at any stages of the formulation process. I'm using mild conditions also, which are important when using biological drugs, aqueous solutions, ambient temperatures, and non-organic solvents. The work I'm currently doing at the moment is in vitro skin diffusion testing, utilizing France diffusion cells to examine the ability of the needles to deliver a model drug, a polymyxin B, which is a peptide antibiotic, through porcine skin. Current indications show that the needle system is successfully capable of delivering the drug through the skin in a period of about 4 hours. Following this, I'm looking to carry out peptide synthesis work, which will aim to synthesize peptides similar to current therapeutic peptides to examine the effectiveness of the delivery system to deliver peptides with a range of different sizes and chemical properties. And finally, I hope to examine a different delivery system utilizing the same formulation, which will be a sustained release system based on microparticles of the same formulation, which will release a drug over an extended period of time. The current system is a bolus delivery system, which is systemic and immediate. So that's the presentation. Have any questions?
Is there any particular part of the body that is more or better suited than some other parts? Like I imagine the palm of the hand is thick skin.
Yeah, the skin thickness varies over different parts of the body. Like the palms and soles of the feet would be particularly thicker, but areas like the forearm would probably be ideal, where the skin thickness is not wouldn't.
And would that skin thickness vary person to person, or even for a single person over a period
It does vary
of
from person to person, but generally speaking, the areas of the body that would be most suitable would probably be the forearm or on the torso.
Is this only relevant to the therapeutic peptides, or are there applications across other types of
research into microneedles is varied. It's very wide. My project is only looking at therapeutic peptides, but that's not to say that the system wouldn't be effective at delivering other pharmaceuticals, but it's not actually a focus of my research.
So it's already been in use in other areas. You're bringing it to therapeutic peptides.
Yeah, exactly. Microneedles as a concept have been used or been researched heavily in a lot of different areas, but this is the only research that I'm aware of in relation to therapeutic peptides and utilizing a dissolving microneedle system.
And is there something specific about that medicine that needs this type of approach?
Well, ideally, if you could deliver them orally, it'd be fantastic, but because they consist of amino acids, if they're taken orally, they just get dissolved or disintegrated into the system by the gastrointestinal tract, so they lose complete activity. So that's why they're limited to injections, really.
No, all the questions have been answered, but I think you should have got an extra minute for the length of your presentation.
I'd have loved an extra couple of minutes. I'd also just like to, before I go, just to say, acknowledge the WIT PhD scholarship. which funds my research, and also to thank my supervisors. Thank you.
Okay, so staying in the School of Science, our next candidate, Michael Donoghue, the title of his work is In-Body Energy Harvesting Nanosensors for Neutral Activation.
Afternoon. Nanosensors are microscopic electronic sensors that you can distribute in the environment or in a room or even in a human body. And they're for sensing data values, data processing, or perhaps even activating some particular function. If you're powering them is a problem though, so you could use energy from the surroundings, like whether it's heat or vibrational energy or some system like that. So we're looking specifically at if you put nanosensors, which are about 1,000 square micrometers in area, into the human body. First of all, we have to protect them with some sort of an artificial membrane that's biocompatible. But secondly, we want to power them in a safe way. So we envisage using a portable ultrasound device that emits ultrasound vibrations into the human tissue. It reaches the nanosensors, and the nanosensors have these piezoelectric nanowires, which when bent will generate small amounts of electric energy. However, if you're using ultrasound into human tissue, it does get absorbed, and it gets absorbed at different frequencies. The safe limit of ultrasound power to put into a human body is 720 milliwatts per square centimeter. And if you use higher frequencies, they will get absorbed in tissue far more than lower frequencies. This is just for one type of tissue, skin fat, the penetration of it is centimeters in. You can see that the higher frequency is absorbed much more than the lower frequency. But more to the point, if you go into denser tissue then, such as muscle or bone, you get even more absorption, and you also get reflection of ultrasound, where you change from one tissue type to another, like from muscle to bone. That's the basis of ultrasound imaging. So we're looking at using the lowest possible frequency to retain as much power as possible into the tissue, which is the 50 kilohertz. We're also looking at having it only in one type of tissue, which would be skin fat. So we're looking at using our nanosensors to stimulate activity in the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nerves of the arm, for example, the median nerve or the ulnar nerve, in the forearm or in the wrist are only a few millimeters deep. And by sending timed pulses of energy into these, we can stimulate motor neurons or sensory neurons. This is to particularly overcome perhaps cases of nerve damage. One nanosensor on its own doesn't produce enough power for that, so we're looking at combining them, coupling them together into and putting them in tissue engineered patches to put directly upon the nerve, or better still within the nerve, the fascicles where the neurons that you might want to stimulate are actually buried. So our modeling is dimensioning patches like this, how many nanosensors you need, how much energy you can produce, and what is the probability of stimulating the neurons that you need. So if you're ever going to hospital in the future to be patched up, maybe that's the kind of patch they'll be using for you. Thank you. Stunned.
Mike, why don't you use the energy in the body itself to charge these? I mean, you have pulses going through the body that you could actually harness as an energy source.
It's a question of intensity and how much energy you actually can get even out of internally in the body, and also the kind of transducer that you use. At least the piezoelectric nanowires, we know how they move in vibration or form or that. But if you're going to use something else in the body, you're going to use a completely different system. You're going to use maybe piezoelectric crystals, but they have their own limitations as well. So specifically, because we were looking at nanowires and bending nanowires, this seemed to be a good application for those specific transducers.
So you couldn't jump up and down and charge them that way?
Oh, it would be very difficult. You might be vibrating very hard to do it.
And they are actuated by an external ultrasound.
Yes.
But they're still quite close to the surface.
Relatively close to the surface, but millimeters or maybe even a centimeter down. As long as it's a tissue like skin fat that doesn't absorb too much of the ultrasound, and as long as you're using a lower frequency like 50 kilohertz, you will transfer sufficient energy into them to vibrate them enough to get the voltage you need.
How do you know when is enough? Or how do you measure how much is needed? Or
Actually,
how do you know about ambient ultrasound from microwaves that you're picking up that are not actuating it?
Microwaves wouldn't...
not microwaves, other ultrasound sources.
Again, is to do with the intensity. This type of intensity we're talking about, you wouldn't get it from stray ultrasound.
Okay,
This is something specifically put into the skin for this. Okay.
Thanks, Michael. And our fourth speaker now, we're switching schools. We're going to the School of Engineering. And that's Anup Pudel. And the title of the presentation is In Investigation of Dielectric Thermoplastic Elastomers for Civil Infrastructural and Energy Harvesting Applications.
Hello, everybody. Before I start, I want to ask you a question. What is dielectric thermoplastic elastomers? Dielectric thermoplastic elastomers are a type of electroactive polymers which bend on application of electric field and vice versa. Or in simple words, they can be bent by applying electricity or can generate electricity when they are stretched. So they can be used as artificial muscles, stress and strain sensors, and electric generators. However, their applications in such fields are very much limited because of their poor polarization capabilities inside electric field. So, in order to enhance this polarization capabilities and make them suitable for energy harvesting, we should treat these materials with other type of additives. However, so in our case, we use two types of additives. The first one is the conductive additives, and the second one is dielectric fillers. So then that co-rotating twin extruder was used to disperse those additives into the polymer matrix. And what was our result? The result shows on the right hand side, if you see, the polarization capabilities has increased by a huge amount. However, there are two issues that still prevail. The one is high change in stiffness, which gives rise to high mechanical losses. So, and the other one is low dispersion of dielectric fillers. So, in order to reduce this high mechanical loss, we can use a solvent or mineral oil, but the dispersion of additives will remain poor. So we use a two-step extrusion method to well disperse the materials as well as have a mechanical compliance of these materials. So in which at first the material is treated with supercritical fluid and extruded through the extrusion so that the materials, the additives are well dispersed into the materials. In the second time, we did this process and swell the polymers and extruded our materials. This doesn't only gives the mechanical compliance of the materials, but also it enhances the polarization abilities. So those who didn't understand, we are just creating a new technique to make a better materials for energy harvesting, sensing, and other artificial muscles applications in robotics. Thank you.
When your title talks about civil infrastructural applications, is it just artificial muscles, or what kind of things?
It's basically the principle of working of artificial muscles and stress and strain sensors in case of dielectric elastomers are almost same. So they can be used in a beam so that it can sense stress as well as strain during looking at the structure of the material. So
and the longevity of that, I mean, is as long as the beam.
Yeah, the materials I have selected is non-degradable, and the longevity, they are non-degradable, and they have a huge life expanse because they don't degrade by hydrolysis or other environmental factors. Thank you.
So the degrading is the issue then?
No, it's not an issue because I have selected the materials that won't degrade in the environmental conditions.
But outside of your study, that's the issue, and you've addressed that.
The issue is not only the degradation. The main issue is the dispersion of these kind of additives inside the polymer matrix.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you try to disperse in other materials, the hydrolysis will occur and slowly degrade the material.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this is a whole new technique that were used to disperse the additives inside the polymer matrix, so that it can be better used for so many other electroactive applications.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Anup. We're going back to the School of Science for our next speaker, which is Arnold Messinga-Mafwas, and the title presentation, Reardon Arrays, Elliptic Functions and Application.
My research study is on Reardon arrays, which is an area of mathematics called enumerative combinatorics, and which deals particularly with non-trivial counting problems. And previous research from Reardon arrays has found applications in computer science, like in binary word excluding patterns, such patterns which can, in the behavior of systems, which can determine events or possibilities leading to systems failure, in the enumeration of RNA secondary structures in molecular biology, or in total chain in physics. And in parallel to Reardon arrays, I also work in the area of elliptic functions, which is in the area of complex analysis. And I've been able to link up Reardon arrays with elliptic functions, which is the first attempt in mathematics. And such an attempt has led to very significant sequences of numbers which have been determined, which are linked or connected to enumeration problems in computer science and in pure mathematics. And I've also extended the application base of Reardon arrays to include problems in dynamical systems such as nonlinear PDEs, which model, like for instance, which model low-pass transmission in electrical lines, and also in PDEs which model the evolution of water waves within canals. And much of my work will be done using the programming tool called Mathematica, which, for instance, with Mathematica, I can program the solutions, visualize the solutions, and perform a lot of activities with them. Like in the third slide, I think you'll see the solutions to the water waste problem, which can be related back to Reardon arrays. And I'm using a lot of techniques in Reardon arrays to develop more and more applications each day. So that's the end of my talk.
Are there applications for this in security or cryptography?
Yeah, that's in the part of elliptic functions, when you're working with elliptic curves.
So it's the elliptical curves which will be used in encryption and security.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Many thanks. Can I ask, what is, by definition, an elliptic function? A couple of your colleagues tried to explain it to me over the years, but I could never get it.
Well, I did not actually. Actually, for this talk, I did not just want to go deep into the mathematics of it. It's very deep, and elliptic functions is a very, very abstract and complicated area in mathematics. But I can just say, you look at, if you're a mathematician, you'll talk of a meromorphic function, which is double periodic. But all of us are used to single periodic functions, like in trigonometry, the sine and cosine function. So we are moving to a higher degree of functions which are far above the trigonometric case.
Thank Thank you, Arnold. Now we switch to the first of two candidates in the School of Health Science. And the first candidate, Rebecca Brennan, and the title for work is Ethnopharmacological Study of the Injecting Use of Image and Performance Enhancement Drugs.
Okay, so my PhD is on the injecting use of image and performance enhancing drugs. So why is that important? Image and performance enhancing drugs are drugs that are used to change the appearance or performance of the human body. And some of these are injected, such as anabolic steroids, human growth hormone, tanning injections, melanotan, or Botox and dermal fillers. In recent times, the online market has made these products much more accessible to everybody. But the problem with the online market is that it's unregulated. So when people go online and they buy these products, they don't know when they receive them, will they be contaminated, counterfeit, or mislabeled. Of importance also is that the group of people that are injecting image and performance enhancing drugs are a new group of injectors. And how this group navigate injecting risk and also perceive what is traditionally stigmatized as a drug use behavior in the context of self-improvement is of interest. Also, many practices in iPad culture are yet scientifically undocumented. This project has an online research setting. The reason this setting was chosen was because it's evidenced in the iPad literature that there exists online communities of people who inject iPad, who log on to discussion forums and swap information. Important information is contained within these postings where uncensored dialogue takes place. Information such as sourcing routes, drug regimens, polypharming regimens, injecting behaviours, and dosages. In recent times, there's been much debate over the privacy rights of people that post in discussion forums and whether it's okay to use their words in published research without permission. So for my project, I'm only using data that's publicly accessible through a simple Google search. Following on from the online phase, a series of single case studies will be conducted, recruited from the locality to support and illuminate the findings from the online setting. So what makes my research unique? Firstly, no ethnographical study investigating a new drug trend has ever been done on this scale. I sampled 8 discussion forums using 2 methods of data searching to ensure a comprehensive sweep of what's current in injecting iPad culture. Previous ethnographical studies which have investigated drug trends using an online setting have used phenomenology as their theoretical approach, which focuses on the individual experience. For my project, I'm using an adaptive theory approach by Derek Lader, which allows for consideration of the social and cultural impact of things like social norms and media on the person who injects iPad, as well as their own personal journey. This is the first time a study of this kind has used adaptive theory. In doing so, I hope to add to our understanding of a cultural phenomenon born of a new age, quick fix, pill for every ill mentality. And I'd like to thank my sponsors, the Irish Research Council, and my supervisors.
Just a couple of quick questions. You mentioned the material you're using was just retrieved from Google search. Is that the implication that if it's retrievable directly by a Google search, it's public domain rather than behind some password protected access to a forum or something?
A lot of forums require registration before they let you search within the database. And it's just come under controversy recently that that's not publicly available information and that it's more ethical not to use it without permission of the forum moderators.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if it's directly crawlable, you assume it's
publicly, it's out there in the public eye,
And what about the validation of the demographics of people who post on these? You're assuming that everybody presents themselves and their online personae as exactly the same, you know?
Yeah, it's not possible to collect demographic information. Okay. But it's a very useful methodology when you're studying something that people can be reticent to come forward and discuss. And it's been proven in previous studies that people might be reticent to discuss their steroid use or injecting drug use.
Okay, and last question, sorry, really, is there a geographical restriction? Are you just looking at things like boards.ie or is it more?
No, it was across the board, global.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm interested in the research methodology because, you know, there's a huge amount of data huge amount of noise on these sites. So how do you actually mine the information for credible information that's useful to you?
My data collection was shaped by my prior theoretical construct, in part. I had two methods of searching the data. One was to take the first 25 threads most recently posted per subfora. So within each discussion forum, they're huge forums. Within each discussion forum, there are several subfora which are dedicated to different topics that may be of interest to my project. So I selected the ones that were relevant to my research questions and took the most recent 25 threads of each of those. So you're getting the latest information that's being discussed by people that are using these drugs. Then my keyword searches were informed by my prior theory. Concepts that I came up with, like health aestheticism, for example, which is people seeking to achieve a healthy looking exterior without much concern for the health of the interior. So concepts like that guided my keyword searches.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
So what was your sample size? Meaning, how many people did you have in each group, roughly?
Sample size, well, I have 8 discussion forums, and I'm going to do 8 single case studies.
So it's eight personas in each group?
No, there would be several tens of thousands of people discussing these topics online. So it's like a content analysis of posts that they post on the online forums.
Okay, so your statistics are going to be quite extensive.
Thank you, Rebecca. The second candidate in the School of Health Science is Alex Donoghue, and the title of his project is an evaluation of the GA Healthy Club project. Sorry, Alexandra, sorry, pardon me.
I'm sorry, another apology. That's not actually the title of my project. So if you're looking forward to an evaluation of the Healthy Club, the title of my project is actually The Environment Was Like They Were in a Pub But With No Alcohol. It's a process evaluation of a gender-sensitised community-based physical activity programme. So why are we focusing on men? Well, men in Ireland have a life expectancy 4.5 years lower than their female counterparts. They also have higher death rates for the majority of leading causes of death across the lifespan. And they're also less likely to engage in traditional health services. So Men on the Move is a physical activity, it's a community-based physical activity programme for Irish men who are inactive. And the goal of the programme is to increase the overall fitness and health and well-being of these men through structured group exercise. So that's gender sensitised in content, context and style of delivery. So we have 4 comparison counties, 4 intervention counties, and 906 men engaged altogether. So we have 489 in the intervention. And of those, 70% had an attendance rate of 50% or higher. That's actually really significant for men because they are a hard-to-reach cohort, and service providers have tried and failed in this area before. So to have that attendance rate is actually significant. So the aim of my research then is to focus on the how. So the how is often overlooked. Research tends to focus on the outcomes, which takes precedence over the process. But the process is really important if we actually want to inform and improve future practice. So the aim of my research then is how do we get men to engage in a physical activity programme? How do we get them to sustain this engagement? And what are the factors that contribute to this? So to do this, we did a number of focus groups with the LSPs who deliver this intervention. So what we found from our focus groups is that gender-sensitised community-based physical activity programmes can be effective in engaging and sustaining engagement with men. And the key factors for these programmes are that they are locally supported. So they're locally driven, community-supported programmes where local champions and local influencers are used to recruit and promote the project. This develops a sense of trust and gives the project a good reputation, and this is what encourages men to engage in the programme in the first instance. Then this sense of trust is really important for men to engage in programmes. So that's it's a sense that they're with their peers. So it's aimed at inactive men. So all the men there will be of the same ability. they're there for the same shared common purpose. So that peer support, trust, commonality is very important to sustain engagement with men in a physical activity programme. And lastly then, it's that it focuses on the needs of the man. So not the ego or the agenda of the tutor or the community organisation that are delivering it. It actually focuses on the needs of the man. And the tutor must know that, and that it's beginner level, it's recreational, it's about introducing men into physical activity. So that's my research.
If you're focusing on the needs of the men and not the tutors, how do you know that that's happening?
Well, all the tutors, they receive engaged training, and so that's engaged training is like the national training for men's health. So they learn how to interact with men, and then the tutors they're with us from the very beginning, so they know the goals of the programme, and yeah.
Is there any monitoring of their talk or their interactions to?
Well, we have a log. They do a weekly log, so we know exactly what they're delivering. But that's it. They have the LSPs they go out weekly with them as well to their sessions, so they do have someone there with them.
Are the tutors men?
No, it's a mix. It's whoever the LSPs thinks is the best fit for the community. So we've had men and women.
Of the three factors you said as your in the last slide, which do you think is the most important?
Well, it's a combination maybe of the two, the local and the trust. That's really important. We found that local advocates are really important to recruit the men and to build up that sense of trust, that sense of safety. Yeah. So using the community base, the local environment, the local setting, the local tutor, that's well, I guess. If you were to merge all those into three, the word would be safety. Yeah, sorry. So none of those words actually, but safety. It's a mixture of all those. Yeah.
Is there any difference between men who previously engaged in in sporting activities and maybe men who haven't engaged? Because a lot of men would be involved at a younger age, maybe.
Yeah, that's a lot of thing with sports, that you get to, 29, 30 and there's nothing there for you. So what we found that it's a lot of men would actually have done no previous a physical activity. This is really, really new for them. And then we also have a lot of men who've come, who have, they've settled down, they've had a family, they haven't been doing anything for the last few years, and they're coming back into it. So I haven't personally been looking at if there's a difference in, outcomes or anything, but it has attracted both cohorts.
And is there a difference between highly competitive and maybe not highly competitive activities?
Yeah, the programme itself, it promotes internal competition. So, for example, at the beginning they do a 1 mile test, so that's timed. So then in 12 weeks we go back and they do their mile time again. So that's where the competitive element does come out. It's that internal competition to improve their time, improve their fitness, and you can really see that. But then a lot of men go as well just for the social aspect, to get out of the house, to meet other men, instead of, say, like the title was, the environment was like a pub with no alcohol. It's just getting out, meeting men. So there is the competition side, and then the social is really important.
Yeah, to get out of the house is just to avoid housework.
Babysitting duties.
Thanks, Alex. Now we turn our attention to the first of three candidates in the School of Humanities. The first candidate, Diane O'Dea, and the title of her work is From Women in Dictionaries to Women in Lexicography, Jovette's Revue de Breuve Role to French Lexicography. So I think she needs an extra minute. Diane.
The title's a little bit different. My name is Diane, and I would like to start by clarifying that my supervisors are Dr. Chris Mulhall and the Reverend Dr. Christine O'Dowd-Smythe. Okay. So in 2004, Josette Redebove, an eminent French lexicographer or dictionary maker, said, and I quote, "Many male lexicographers are not sexist, that is not the problem, but they take man, the male, as the norm, not considering women. For them, it is altogether secondary, end of quote. That is how Josette Redebove explained her understanding of the imbalance in the representation of men and women in dictionaries. Indeed, a study during the empirical context of my research, the 30 glorious years, 1945 to 1975, of the invented examples in dictionaries reveals a striking observation. The majority of examples are representations of men. He has finished, he hails from America, when these sentences could just as easily have used the feminine pronoun. If the population is roughly made up of half men, half women, and language is a representation of a culture and an identity, then that doesn't match up in the dictionary. Huge social as well as economic change occurred during post-war France, with French legislation enabling an autonomy for women. Despite these legal transformations, we do not see this emancipation reflected in the dictionary. From 1946 or 1947 right through to as late as 1972, we can see in the dictionary that men hold the role of student and worker, whilst women are continually portrayed in relation to their appearance and their domestic roles. Why is this important? Because of the power resulting from the authority that the dictionary holds. Is it in the dictionary? Yes. Well, then it must be true. During the same time period, advertising slogans for modern appliances that were to set women free placed them firmly back in the home, as you can see with the man who comes home from work in his suit to find his apron-clad wife as the ideal figure of a woman to whom he gives the perfect gift, a kitchen appliance. Although social change and laws were guaranteeing women's autonomy outside the home and integration into the workplace, the image of this scene was still being reflected in the dictionary. Upon entering into what she terms the masculine world of dictionaries, Redebove decided that she would correct the oversight of the absence of women, ensuring the presence of both men and women in the dictionary, as is true of humanity, in her dictionary examples. She included positive examples more in agreement with society. She is a minister, a maths teacher, a motorcyclist. Her overall portrayal was a complete image of women as productive members of society, demonstrating the inclusivity of women's roles as being both inside and outside of the domestic sphere. Thank you.
I just recently saw something about this. I don't remember if it was in the U.S. or not, but about the dictionary, and Oxford had to change that. Did you see that?
Of rabid
yes.
and feminist.
Did you see that?
Yes.
And did you think they trumped your
in the,
your
in
study?
The Guardian? No, because when I was, the period that I'm looking at is from 1945 to 1975, and during that time lexicographers were free to invent their own examples, and also I'm looking at bilingual dictionaries, French, English. So when I saw that, I thought it was very interesting that it's still current, and it's the Oxford Dictionary, but now dictionaries are made in a different way. They're taken from a corpus, so whatever happens, conversations on the internet or in the media, that's where their phrases are taken from. So I thought it was great that it is still ongoing. Yeah,
it's it shows the relevancy of what you're doing.
I was delighted to see it.
And the period that you've chosen from 1945 to 75, is that period chosen because during that 30-year window lexicographers were free to choose, as opposed to nowadays it is much more constrained?
Yes, that was one of the reasons, because that's the first part of the research, looking at when they had the freedom to invent their own examples. And also that time post-war to 1975, there were so many changes that did occur. So the secondary enabling methodology will allow me to compare what was in the dictionary to what was going on in society at that time.
Okay, very good.
So I assume that the majority of lexicographers at this time were males?
I think the lexicographers that were in power, that were editors, were males. But Josette Redebove actually says that there were a lot of women working on the teams, and she brought a lot of women onto her team. because she said that the nature of dictionary making was meticulous, and she said that she found that the characteristics of women were quite suited to compiling dictionaries. So I haven't looked at the teams. I've been looking at the editors of the dictionaries, and most of them, were male.
And I assume also that the discourse around feminism and equality came much later, anyway, in the public space. So it would have an influence as well.
Yeah, towards the end, well, post-May 1968, there was a lot of changes, and into the 70s. And as you said, it's still continuing today that it's noted in the dictionary.
Thanks, Diane. Our second speaker, also in the School of Humanities, is Elizabeth Howard, and the title of her work is Red Kettle Theatre Company Performing the Region.
Hi everyone. Red Kettle Theatre Company operated in Waterford between 1985 and 2014. It was one of a cluster of professional regional theatre companies that emerged in Ireland during the late 1980s and early 1990s. These companies appeared at that time because of the economic infrastructure that the Arts Council, operating as an arm of the government, put in place to encourage this growth. This was part of a wider plan of the Irish government to develop industry in the regions in order for the country to become integrated into the European and global systems of capitalism, which has been a major political focus since the 1960s. Therefore, my PhD positions the emergence and development of Red Kettle as part of a complex social, political and economic nexus, which is relative to geographical location and the cultural moment in history. In other words, Red Kettle was a product of time and place. Red Kettle's form of theatre practice was largely mainstream, in that it produced well-known plays from the Irish and world canon and followed the operational conventions of theatre. However, it was the company's intimate connection to the local community, the standards of production exhibited in the work, and the various ways in which the company was managed artistically and administratively, which formed the complete story of its instatement, development, and demise. Thus, the theatre practice of Red Kettle was only one aspect of the company's trajectory, and a study of the company would be incomplete without incorporating the on- and off-stage practices into its analysis. My PhD views the on- and off-stage practices of Red Kettle as an entire performance, with its own dramaturgy and ethnography, that is reflective of the historical, cultural, social, and circumstantial contexts. For example, Red Kettle performed local identity, not only through its on-stage representations of Waterford, but also through the occupation of various local buildings and its presence in the local media. It also performed cultural policy by partaking in the rules implemented by the government, which allowed regional theatre practice to be publicly funded. Viewing Red Kettle in this way demonstrates that theatre itself is not necessarily a blatant or political act, but the systems through which it operates means that it becomes political through its very presence in the polis. Indeed, looking at our own individual lives in this way reveals our existence in society insists on our participation in and reproduction of the political of the everyday. Therefore, this study of Red Kettle is worthwhile because it not only preserves the legacy of what is possibly Waterford's most famous theatre company, but it also exposes the political power structures within which we operate, providing perspective and knowledge so that lessons for the future can be learned from the past. Thanks.
So if you say lessons that we can learn is the demise of Red Kettle, or I mean the eventual closing of Red Kettle. Is there a political context to that? Is there a social context to that? That maybe while they leveraged the opportunities when they started, that by the time they got to the end, then maybe they hadn't that connectivity that was there at the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think they weren't making work that the Arts Council wanted to fund towards the end, and that I think that was to do with its relevance to the community, or with its lack of relevance to the community, because it started off as a very community-based theatre company, and then towards the end, while it's still rooted in its Waterford context, it was sort of moving away from I suppose, depending on the audience as much, or making work specifically for its audience. It wasn't really looking at its audience as much, as in-depthly as it had at the beginning of its process.
Could you explain that slide to me that has the map of Ireland, because I don't have the context to understand that.
Yeah, sure. Well, it was just that there was there were particular areas of promoted for regional development, and it was the urban renewal scheme. And then there were particular areas where theatre companies that were funded by the Arts Council, they appeared, and the theatre companies that were funded by the Arts Council generally appeared in the areas that were where urban renewal was promoted. Yeah, basically, yeah, and along different areas. There was a report in the 1960s, the Buchanan report, and it investigated aspects of urban renewal and development, and there were certain areas in Ireland dedicated for this type of renewal, and then these are taken from the Arts Council Arts Plan 1995 to 1997. So it's just that there's a correlation, I think, between the two things. Yes. Yeah.
It sounds like a fascinating study, but if I may, just to pick up on Willie's point, yes, I know what we were told at the time, but I think the study of the demise of Red Kettle in particular in your report would be most interesting, because there was always the possibility that, as what happened in many areas of classical music, it wasn't so much that the enterprise lost touch with the community as that it lost touch with what the Arts Council wanted, which wasn't quite the same thing. And the reason given was that it had lost touch with the community. But what one would like to see very much is several independent reports on that and whether that's actually true.
Well, yeah, I think that. I think that what you're saying about losing touch with the Arts Council, as I said before, that is definitely true. But I think that there is some sort of correlation between making work that's relevant to your audience and making work that pleases the Arts Council, because you have to have an audience in order to make money and to have a prosperous theatre company. So it's I think there is some correlation between that. Anything else? No, thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you to all our speakers and to the panel, the evaluation panel. Just before we move outside, because that's where our final speaker would be, performance. I've been asked to remind people, if your name badges before you leave today, you kindly leave them in the box. There's boxes outside the auditorium here. And now I'd like to move outside for some light refreshments and to hear our final performance, Sean Walsh, again in the School of Humanities. And we reconvene here at 4:10. They're gone. Thanks, everybody.